Do you know who terrifies social media companies more than anyone else? It's not the regulators, it's not the competitors, it's the person who quietly opts out, the one who refuses to play the game, the one who watches everyone else perform their lives while they remain invisible. And here's what nobody wants to admit, that silence is deafening. Think about your social media feed right now, hundreds of faces, thousands of moments. Everyone broadcasting their existence like it's a competition for relevance. Birthday parties, gym selfies, vacation poses, meal photos, relationship updates. An endless parade of "look at me, validate me, prove I matter." Everyone's shouting into the void, desperately hoping the void shouts back. Now think about the people who aren't there, the ones you actually know exist but never see. They're at the same parties, living the same lives, experiencing the same world. But they're not performing it, they're not documenting it, they're not seeking approval for it. What does that mean? What does that silence reveal? Most people will tell you it's shyness, social anxiety, fear of judgment, low self-esteem, the comfortable explanations that let everyone sleep at night, the assumptions that make non-posters seem like the broken ones. But psychology tells us something far more interesting is happening, something that reveals a fundamental split in how humans navigate modern existence, something that challenges everything we think we know about confidence, connection, and what it means to truly live. Here's the truth that makes people uncomfortable. The absence of someone's digital presence isn't weakness. It's often the opposite. It's strength disguised as silence. It's confidence that doesn't need an audience. It's security that doesn't require external proof. Let me explain what's really going on in the mind of someone who refuses to post their face online. Every time you post a photo, your brain releases dopamine in anticipation of social reward. Likes, comments, reactions. Your nervous system literally treats social media engagement like a drug, and like any drug, you build tolerance. You need more and more to feel the same hit. Psychologists call this variable ratio reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. You don't know when the reward is coming, so your brain stays hooked, checking, waiting, hoping. Post a selfie at 9 in the morning, check it at 9:15. 3 likes, check it at 9:30. 15 likes. Your brain is getting trained, conditioned, controlled. People who don't post their photos have opted out of this entire system. They've recognized something crucial. That validation loop is a trap. Once you enter it, you need it. You start crafting your life around it. You start making decisions based on how they'll look online rather than how they'll feel in reality. You become the director of your own life performance, and the audience is a bunch of people who are barely paying attention. The person who doesn't post isn't avoiding judgment, they're avoiding dependency. That distinction is massive. Someone with social anxiety avoids posting because they fear negative evaluation. They're terrified of criticism, of rejection, of being seen as less than. But someone with genuine self-security avoids posting because they don't need evaluation at all. They don't fear judgment. They simply don't require it. One is running from something. The other simply doesn't need what everyone else is chasing. Clinical psychology research shows us there are 2 types of self-esteem, fragile and secure. Fragile self-esteem needs constant external reinforcement. It's high but unstable, like a tall building with a weak foundation. These are the people posting every meal, every outfit, every thought. Not because they're confident, but because they need continuous proof of their worth. They need you to tell them they matter. Secure self-esteem doesn't fluctuate based on external validation. It remains stable whether you get 100 likes or 0. And people with secure self-esteem actually post less frequently across every study that's examined this pattern. They don't need the applause because they're not performing, they're not hiding, they're just not performing. Here's something that sounds contradictory. The most confident people often have the strictest privacy boundaries. You'd think confidence means openness, right? If you're secure, you should have nothing to hide. But that's backwards thinking. Real confidence means you understand the value of what's yours. You don't give it away for free. Privacy orientation is a psychological trait that measures how much control someone wants over their personal information. High privacy orientation doesn't mean paranoia. It doesn't mean you're hiding something shameful. It means you recognize that your life, your image, your moments have value beyond their ability to generate social media engagement. If you owned a Picasso, would you hang it on your front lawn for everyone to see? Of course not. You'd protect it. You'd control who gets access to it. You'd be selective about when and how it's displayed. People who don't post their photos are treating their lives like that Picasso. They understand that constant exposure diminishes value. That mystery has power. That not everything needs to be shared to be real. They're protecting what matters. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is hanging their Picassos on the front lawn, wondering why nobody treats them as valuable anymore. There's a concept called the spotlight effect. Most people dramatically overestimate how much others notice them. They think everyone's watching, everyone's judging, everyone cares deeply about their choices. They live like they're the star of a show that everyone's tuned into. But people who avoid posting have moved past this bias. They've realized a liberating truth: most people aren't thinking about you at all. They're too busy thinking about themselves. They're too busy worrying about their own image, their own posts, their own validation needs. Once you truly absorb that reality, the urge to post evaporates. Why perform for an audience that isn't really watching? Let's talk about self-awareness. Self-concept clarity measures how clearly you understand who you are, your values, your goals, your authentic preferences versus the preferences you think you should have. It's the difference between knowing yourself and thinking you know yourself. Research consistently shows that people with high self-concept clarity post less on social media. And it makes perfect sense when you think about it. If you know who you are, you don't need to test different versions of yourself online. You don't need to see which persona gets the most likes. You don't need external feedback to confirm your identity. You're not asking the internet, am I this person or that person? But if your sense of self is unclear or unstable, social media becomes a laboratory. You post different images, different captions, different angles. You're essentially running experiments on your own identity. You're asking the crowd, is this who I should be? What about this version? How about now? Which me do you like best? It's identity formation through committee. And it's exhausting. It's also ineffective because the crowd doesn't know you. They're responding to a curated image, not the real person behind it. The person who doesn't post has often already done that internal work. They know who they are. They know what matters to them. They've figured out their values through introspection, not through likes and comments. They don't need 1,000 strangers to weigh in on their existence. There's also internal locus of evaluation. It means you judge yourself by your own standards, not others. You decide what success looks like. You decide what beauty means. You decide what's worth celebrating. People with internal locus of evaluation don't post because posting requires caring what others think, not just a little bit. A lot. You have to care enough to curate the image, write the caption, select the timing, monitor the response. Every step of that process is oriented toward external judgment. If you genuinely don't need that external evaluation, the whole process seems pointless, like spending hours preparing for a test you're not taking. This isn't arrogance. It's not thinking you're better than everyone else. It's simply having a different source of self-worth, one that doesn't depend on digital applause, one that's internal rather than external, stable rather than fluctuating with every notification. There's another layer to this. People who stay off social media or avoid posting their photos tend to score higher on self-regulation and intrinsic motivation. Self-regulation means you can control your impulses and delay gratification. Post something and get 0 likes for 6 hours? That feels terrible. Your brain treats it as social exclusion, which triggers the same pain centers as physical injury. If you never post, you never experience that cycle. You're choosing long-term emotional stability over short-term dopamine hits. Intrinsic motivation means you do things because they're meaningful to you, not because they'll impress others. You go to the gym for your health, not for the before and after photos. You travel for the experience, not for the Instagram story. Emotionally intelligent people also understand that social media is a comparison minefield. Social comparison theory tells us that humans constantly evaluate themselves against others. But social media has weaponized this tendency. Everyone posts their highlight reel, their best angle, their happiest moment. and your brain doesn't automatically adjust for that curation. It sees someone's vacation photos and compares them to your Tuesday afternoon. The comparison is always unfair, always distorted, always painful. People who avoid posting have recognized this trap. They've seen how social media corrodes mental health, how it breeds envy and inadequacy. So they opt out, not because they're weak, but because they're wise enough to see the game for what it is. And here's something else. There's a personality trait called need for cognition. People high in this prefer substance over superficiality. They want meaningful conversations, not small talk, authentic connection, not parasocial performance. And here's the problem. Social media is fundamentally superficial. You get a caption, some emojis, maybe a paragraph, but you don't get nuance, you don't get complexity, you don't get the messy, contradictory, evolving nature of real human thought. People who think deeply often find social media frustrating because it reduces everything to digestible content. It turns your life into a brand. It forces you to simplify yourself until you fit into a feed. They'd rather have 3 real conversations than 300 shallow interactions. They'd rather be truly known by 5 people than superficially recognized by 5,000. This is why many intellectuals and deep thinkers maintain minimal social media presence. They're protecting their mental space from the constant noise of performative existence. Now let's talk about control. Posting your photo online means losing control of your image forever. Once it's out there, people can screenshot it, share it, use it in ways you never intended, judge you by a single frozen moment that doesn't represent who you are. People with high need for control find this intolerable. And need for control isn't always pathological. Sometimes it's just smart. It's recognizing that your image and your data are valuable commodities that companies will monetize if you let them. Social media companies make billions by selling your attention and your data. The person who doesn't post has opted out of being the product. There's also the permanence problem. Your social media history becomes a permanent record. A joke from 10 years ago resurfaces. A photo from college costs you a job. People who avoid posting are thinking 10 years ahead. They're asking, will I regret this? Could this harm me later? And often the answer is no. But there's something even deeper going on. The version of you that exists on social media isn't really you. It's a curated, edited, optimized version. The you with good lighting. The you from the best angle. The you who had time to think of the perfect caption. Social media you is a performance, and everyone knows it, but we all pretend we don't. People who refuse to post have become exhausted by this performance. They've realized that maintaining a digital persona is a second job, one that doesn't pay but demands constant attention. Think about how much effort goes into a single, casual photo. You take 20 shots, you select the best one, you edit it. You write and rewrite the caption. You consider the timing, you monitor the response. That's not casual, that's production. Some people simply don't want to produce themselves, they want to exist without editing. They want authenticity, even if that means being invisible online. There's research on authentic living. It measures how much your external behavior matches your internal experience. People who score high tend to post less because posting inherently requires performance. The person who doesn't post has often decided that real authenticity means being the same person online and offline. And if you can't be fully yourself online without consequences, why bother? Just be yourself in real life, where it actually matters. And here's something advertisers have known forever. Scarcity creates value. The rare is valuable. The common is worthless. Your image is the same way. People who post constantly make themselves common. You see them so often that the impact diminishes. They become background noise. But the person who never posts, they become mysterious. Interesting. Memorable. When they do show up, people pay attention. Think about the people you find most intriguing. Are they the ones posting every day? Or are they the ones who appear occasionally, leaving you curious? Mystery is magnetic. In an age of oversharing, the person who shares nothing becomes fascinating by default. In any group, the person who talks the least is often perceived as the most powerful. Their silence suggests they have nothing to prove. The same principle applies online. People who understand social power often minimize their digital footprint intentionally. Being seen less makes each appearance more significant. Saying less makes each word more impactful. It's strategic invisibility, and it works. Let's be direct about something. Social media is terrible for mental health. The research is overwhelming. Increased anxiety, increased depression, increased eating disorders, increased loneliness despite being more connected than ever. The mechanism is simple. Constant social comparison plus curated highlight reels plus dopamine manipulation equals psychological damage. People who avoid posting are practicing mental health self-care. They're protecting themselves from the comparison trap, from the validation addiction, from the performance exhaustion. When you post a photo that doesn't perform well, your brain interprets it as rejection, as social exclusion, as evidence that you're losing value. Imagine experiencing that cycle repeatedly. The cycle becomes compulsive and corrosive. People who don't post have exited that cycle entirely. Their mood doesn't depend on how many likes they got. Their self-worth isn't tied to their engagement rate. Their mental health isn't held hostage by an algorithm. That's freedom. If you're posting, you're monitoring. If you're monitoring, you're checking constantly. If you're checking constantly, you're never fully present anywhere else. Your attention is fractured. The person who doesn't post gets those resources back. They can read a book without checking their phone. They can experience a moment without thinking about how it will look online. They're mentally free in a way that constant posters simply aren't. Think about this question. If you do something and don't post about it, did it still happen? Obviously, yes. But watch how people actually behave. Many now treat experiences as content-generating opportunities first and actual experiences second. They go to a restaurant not to enjoy the food, but to photograph it. They go to a concert not to hear the music, but to film it. The experience becomes secondary to the documentation. People who don't post have rejected this inversion. They prioritize the actual experience over the social media version. They're fully present because they're not performing for an absent audience. When you're planning to post, you're constantly evaluating. Is this photo worthy? What angle works best? You're experiencing it through the lens of how others will perceive it. When you're not planning to post, you're just there, fully engaged, experiencing it for yourself, not for an audience. People who avoid posting have chosen reality over performance, the actual sunset over the photo of the sunset, the real relationship over the relationship content. They understand that life is what happens when you're not trying to prove you're living it. Let's zoom out for a moment. What does it mean to exist in the digital age? Are you the sum of your posts? Does your digital presence define your actual existence? People who don't post are wrestling with these existential questions more consciously. They're asking, what is identity when you can curate yourself? What is authenticity when performance is mandatory? What is self-worth when it's measured in engagement metrics? Social media offers easy answers. Post more, engage more, perform more, prove your existence through documentation. But those easy answers lead to empty outcomes. A curated life that looks impressive but feels hollow. A digital presence that's popular but not genuine. The person who doesn't post is rejecting those easy answers in search of harder, more meaningful ones. Can I exist without an audience? Can I be valuable without external validation? Can I build a life that's rich internally even if it's invisible externally? The answer is yes. Humans did it for millennia before social media existed, but in the current moment, choosing that path feels radical. Maybe the most powerful thing you can do in an age of compulsive performance is refuse to perform. The most radical act in an age of oversharing is keeping something for yourself. People who don't post aren't missing out on modern life. They're reclaiming something older and deeper, the right to exist privately, the right to experience without documenting, the right to be known by few rather than seen by many. That's not hiding, that's choosing. So here's the bottom line. What does it really mean when someone doesn't post their photos online? It means they've evaluated the cost-benefit analysis and decided the costs outweigh the benefits. The cost of constant performance, the cost of validation dependency, the cost of privacy invasion, the cost of mental health damage, against benefits that are largely illusory, feeling connected while being isolated, feeling seen while being misunderstood. The person who doesn't post has recognized that equation doesn't balance. They've recognized that social media promises community but delivers comparison, promises connection but delivers performance. They're not antisocial. They're not afraid. They're not missing out. They're living intentionally in a world of reflexive behavior. They're choosing presence in a world of performance. That's not weakness. That's clarity. That's confidence. That's knowing who you are without needing the internet to confirm it. Look around at who's posting constantly and who's not. The people who are actually successful, actually happy, actually fulfilled, they're not the ones broadcasting it constantly. They're too busy living it. When you're genuinely happy, you don't need to prove it. When you're genuinely confident, you don't need to display it. When you're genuinely living, you don't need to document it. The absence of someone's photos online might be the loudest statement they make. It says, "I'm not playing this game. I'm not performing for you. I'm not seeking your validation. I'm living my life for me, not for your feed." In a world where everyone is screaming for attention, that silence is deafening. So the next time you notice someone who never posts their photos, don't feel sorry for them. Don't assume they're shy or insecure. Consider the possibility that they've figured something out, that they've seen through the illusion, that they've chosen reality over performance. Consider that they're not behind the curve, they're ahead of it. Not rejecting modern life, but refusing to be consumed by it. The person who doesn't post isn't invisible. They're just visible where it actually matters, to the people who actually know them, in the moments that actually count. Your life is happening right now, not in the feed, not in the likes, right here, right now, in this moment that will never come again. Are you experiencing it, or are you too busy trying to capture it for people who aren't even here? At the end of your life, nobody's going to ask about your follower count. They're going to ask about the impact you made, the relationships you built, the person you became, and none of that requires a single post. The people who understand this have already put their phones down. They're out there living, experiencing, connecting, growing, quietly, privately, authentically. While everyone else is performing for an audience that's not really watching, they're building something real. That's the psychology of people who don't post their photos online. They're not the problem. They're not the outliers. They're the ones who've already figured it out.